In the bustling city of Jankara, there lived a police officer named Stanley Ubong. Stanley appeared to many as a model and law-abiding citizen. He was married to Agnes, a nurse with a gentle smile that could warm anyone's heart. They had 2 children, Edith and Roseanne, who were the joy of their lives. Their home was in a beautiful neighborhood, filled with well-maintained gardens and friendly faces. From the outside, Officer Stanley's family appeared to be living a dream life. Stanley and Agnes' life looked perfect. They had a lovely house, nice cars, and enjoyed occasional family vacations. They often went to parks, had picnics, and took trips to the beach. The community of Jankara admired them, and Stanley was also well respected as a police officer. However, behind this lifestyle that seemed perfect, Stanley was living a double life. Stanley began to misuse his position as a police officer. It all started with small bribes and some money handed under the table to avoid minor troubles. At first, Stanley thought it was a harmless way to increase his income. He made it a common practice and felt that everybody in the police force were doing it to some extent. But as time passed, his small bribe-taking act grew into serious corruption. Stanley's initial acceptance of bribes turned into a more systematic pattern. He started demanding larger sums of money from people and businesses. He used his rank and authority in the police force to intimidate people into paying him. He would threaten to fake evidence or press false charges if they did not cooperate with him. Stanley's confidence grew after each successful extortion, and he became more shameless and stronger in his actions. One day, Stanley was called to a small shop where a theft had occurred. The shopkeeper, Mr. Kunle, had reported a young man who had stolen a few items from his mini store. Stanley saw that as an opportunity to make money from this situation. When he arrived at the shop, Mr. Kunle was nervous. Stanley demanded that Mr. Kunle pay a bribe to avoid any legal trouble. Mr. Kunle was surprised by Stanley's demand, but ended up handing over a large sum of money, hoping to avoid further issues. Stanley didn't stop there. He turned his attention to the young man who had stolen from the shop. The young man was already scared and trembling. Stanley threatened to arrest him unless he pays him a large sum of money. The young man, who had no other option, paid the money. Stanley left the shop with a huge amount of cash, feeling happy and satisfied with his exploit. The shopkeeper and the young man who stole from the store were left shaken and scared. Among Stanley's victims was a man named Kofi. Kofi owned a small business that was crawling and struggling to survive. Stanley forcefully took a large bribe from him by threatening to bring false charges against him and lock up his small store. Kofi was devastated and had no government official to report the matter to. He couldn't afford the bribe and was still struggling to keep his business running. Stanley's threat made him feel helpless and angry. Kofi wanted to seek justice, but he didn't know how. One day, Kofi decided to travel to Aroshuku, an African village known for its powerful shrine. The journey was very long and stressful. The village was small and the road to the village was rough. Kofi faced many difficulties along the way, but he was determined to find a way to get back at Stanley. He arrived at the shrine where he met a traditional priest known for his powerful rituals and curses. The traditional priest listened to Kofi's story with great attention and pitied him. He heard about Stanley's corruption and the suffering Stanley had caused. After listening, the priest agreed to help Kofi out. They started a ritual that involved laying a curse on Stanley. The ritual was hard and ceremonial. The priest chanted incantations and Kofi made offerings to the gods, asking for their help in bringing justice upon Stanley. Back in Jankara, Stanley was not aware of the curse that had been placed on him. His life seemed to be flourishing. He bought a new luxury car, refurnished his house with expensive furniture, and took his family on lavish vacations. His family visited expensive places and enjoyed luxurious stays at high-standard hotels. Stanley was often away from home, caught up in his corrupt act, but Agnes, his wife, tried to keep things normal for the children. Agnes noticed the changes in Stanley. He seemed distant and preoccupied. Their home was filled with new items, but the warmth and closeness of the family seemed to be fading. Edith and Roseanne missed spending time with their father. They were used to having him around for bedtime stories and weekend outings, but now he was rarely present. Agnes was worried, but was not able to find out what was wrong. Stanley would brush off her concerns, saying that he was just busy with work. One evening, Stanley had just completed another successful extortion. He was driving home, his mind racing with thoughts of new plans to rip people of their hard-earned money and the easy money he had made that day. He was distracted and didn't pay attention to his driving. As he sped through the streets, a car coming from the opposite direction lost its control. The two vehicles collided with great force. Stanley's car was left crumpled. Emergency services arrived quickly at the scene of the event, but the damage was very much. Stanley was rushed to the hospital. His injuries were serious, and the doctors worked urgently to save his life. While he was lying down on the hospital bed, he received a heartbreaking news. His wife and children had been involved in a separate car accident, and they all lost their lives. The news was delivered with a heavy heart. Stanley was broken with grief. He struggled to picture the loss of his family, the guilt of his actions, and the realization that his corruption had led to this tragedy consumed him. In the hospital, Stanley was tormented by memories of his family. He thought about their laughter, their love, and the dreams they had shared. The pain of losing them in a single day was unbearable. He lay in his hospital bed, feeling a deep sense of remorse and despair. The police authorities continued their investigation into Stanley's corrupt activities. They had gathered enough evidence against him and were preparing to make it public. The community of Jankara was shocked and saddened by the news of Stanley's downfall. People who had once admired him now felt betrayed. Stanley's corruption and the suffering he had caused were brought to light. The city was relieved that the man who had hurt so many people could no longer harm anyone. Officer Stanley's life ended in a tragic way. His once respected name became synonymous with corruption and greed. The city of Jankara remembered him not as the honorable officer they once knew, but as a man whose actions led to his own downfall and the heart-wrenching loss of his family. We finally come to the end of the story, guys. If you find this video interesting, please do well to like, share and subscribe, and also turn on the notification bell so you can always be the first person to get notified anytime I drop a new video just like this one. Thank you.